We find Vecna, we end this once and for all, together.
On November 26th.
We have a plan. It's a bit insane. Everyone in?
He knows where we are.
Watch out!
Get ready for one last adventure.
We stay true to ourselves. Stay true to our friends, no matter the cost.
Found you. Stranger Things, the final season, begins November 26th, only on Netflix.
With new, gentler scented Clorox disinfecting wipes, clean finally smells as good as it feels. On everything from lamps to ceiling fans. Even on your kid's toy shark. Oh, ouch. Clorox disinfecting wipes, now available in crisp lemon. Find it on Amazon. Clorox, clean feels good.
Three, two, one. Welcome to another Britflix.com podcast. My name's Stuart Wright, and today's guest is screenwriter Philip Ralph. He wrote the screenplay for 2024's feature-length docudrama 8 Days to the Moon and Back for the BBC, and is developing a sports biopic about Nicole Cook, the first British cyclist to be ranked number one for Rush producer Andrew Eaton. Welcome to the show, Philip.
Stuart, hello. Nice to see you, and thank you for having me.
Absolutely my pleasure. Now, just so we know we're doing what we agreed to do, as I understand it, we are going to focus on the ongoing rolling paradigm shift stroke crisis in TV particularly, but also in film. Plus, You'll be providing us with maybe a short, sharp blast of where we are now and what we can possibly do to make things better going forward. Have you got a magic wand, Philip, that you've not told the industry about?
If I haven't got it with me at the moment, Stuart, but I'll try and conjure something up.
Okay. Well, we'll see if we can use just the power of we'll get Alan Moore in or something like that. He's a magician, isn't he? And then we're going to look at 3 films that have impacted everything in your adult life. Does that sound like what you've signed up for?
It sounds like exactly what I signed up for.
Perfect. Well, look, let us. You're a writer. You write for TV and film. So when you say ongoing rolling paradigm shift stroke crisis, for the layperson that might not know, or the sort of head in the clouds person in film or TV, what do you mean by paradigm shift crisis?
Okay. So as you say, I'm a writer for TV, and for much of the last 20 plus years. So I started out as an actor, trained as an actor at RADA. Okay. And worked as an actor for about 10 years, and then sort of slowly segued into writing, and then was fortunate enough to get a gig, a regular gig, writing for the BBC's daytime soap Doctors. And I wrote on it off and on for 19 years, and then the show was axed. Yeah, I wrote 73 episodes. And I'm not like there are some of my contemporaries who wrote 100 in the hundreds. So when the show was axed in late 2023, obviously for me it was my main source of income. You can probably tell from my accent, which is the other side of the Pennines from you. So what's left of it. So I'm from Halifax originally. Okay. Working class, and only first person in my family to want to go into the arts really and get into drama school and stuff like that. So that was kind of my background. So anyway, I got this gig on Doctors, and Doctors was axed. And when it was axed, it was basically my main source of income. I'd done quite a few other bits of screenwriting, but writing a few episodes of that every year was like my solid source of income. And when it was axed, I sort of really started to, A, I had an existential crisis myself, and then B, I started to sort of go, well, what's going on? Hang on, why have they axed this show? Doctors, for those who didn't watch it, it went out 4 to 5 times a week, daytime. Just after the lunchtime news, half an hour every day. So a lot of episodes, like 200 episodes a year plus. Yeah. So a lot of people were being employed on that show, and suddenly it was axed and it was gone, right? And that's, it's basically it's done to TV production in the Midlands. What the what the closure of a car factory would have done to car production in the Midlands. Do you know what I mean? It's just gone.
Yeah.
So I started to go, well, hang on. So what's going on? Was it the ratings? No, the ratings were strong. So it all came down to money, right? It came down to money. BBC's got to save money somewhere. Long story short, I started to just go, what's going on systemically across the industry? And as I started to look and as I started to think about this, it just became apparent to me, doctors axing came in the wake of Holby City going, so they were like 2 of the 4 key continuing dramas that the BBC produced in-house, the other 2 being EastEnders and Casualty. So they were, they'd gone, and then looking across the industry going, well, so what else has gone? Well, you remember the era when in the midweek drama slots, the returning dramas like, I don't know, New Tricks and stuff, that weren't necessarily sort of crime dramas. There's a lot of crime drama now, but there was a lot of stuff that wasn't crime dramas. Cold Feet, kind of midweek relationship dramas and stuff. All of that had gone. So I started to sort of just get really, really interested. And eventually it kind of occurred to me that actually what was going on was something wider and it was more systemic. And I started to look into the reasons behind it. So going back to your question, what I mean, or I think I mean by this kind of paradigm shift, is that basically, I think you and I are probably sort of round about the same age.
Yeah.
Stuart, I was born in the early 70s.
Yep, 71.
There we are, 71 too. So, we're almost exactly the same. So the way that TV that was developed, produced, funded, and made for most of our lives has gone almost completely. What's left is kind of clinging on by its fingernails. And what that means, the impact of that is that even though from a TV viewer's perspective, there's more TV than people have ever had, there's more choice than people have ever had in their lives. I can watch this, I can watch that, watch the other. What it means for the UK TV workforce is massively less work than there has been. So actually, whilst there's loads of TV being made and loads of TV available for people to watch, in terms of what people can actually work on, there's lots and lots that's gone and isn't coming back because the model is changing so rapidly. And basically, it kind of occurred to me that what's happening to telly is what's happened to our politics and our public services and everything, which is basically austerity. And the reason for that, give it a name, aside from lots and lots of factors, but basically it's the streamers. So the streamers came in rather like what Napster and then Spotify did to the music industry via the internet. It's exactly what the streamers have done to UK TV production. They've come in like the big supermarkets did, undercut the local shops, closed them down, and then took over. And that's exactly what's happening. So it's a big, complex situation, but the kind of the main takeaway from it is that there's way less work than there was, and it's much, much harder to A, get a foothold in the industry, and B, actually make a viable living in the industry. And that became this massive bee in my bonnet. And so the kind of end point of this was on the last day that Doctors was being produced, which was the 1st of March last year, 2024. I got a bee in my bonnet and wrote a blog post about it, just kind of going, well, what is all this systemic stuff that I'm thinking about? And I put it on Twitter in a 52 tweet thread.
Cool.
At like 9 in the I know, like, what was I thinking, right? So it's 52 tweets long, this thing. At 9 in the morning, I put it on, and this was 9 in the morning on the Friday, the 1st of March, the last day the Doctors were being produced. And by the end of the day, it had 1 million views. And it's currently had just shy of 2 million views, basically 2 million people looked at it. And it became this weird viral thing. And therefore, it became this odd sort of second string to my bow, which was, somehow, because I'd put that up, I was kind of interviewed by journalists and asked what I thought about the TV industry, like I'm any more of an expert than anybody else is.
So what? I mean, obviously, you don't need to tell me all 52, but what for you were the key things, and maybe what were the key things that got the most attention in those 2 million views? Was the tweets within that in terms of points you're making that seemed to create more conversation than others?
I mean, I guess, what I tried to do, because like you, I'm a storyteller. So of course, what I tried to do was, in this blog post that I'd written, kind of put a journey through it. And the journey was Doctors has been axed. And if you don't watch Doctors, you don't care. But Why does it matter? It matters because it's the canary in the coal mine.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's symptomatic of something. It's not just, a TV show's been cancelled. TV shows get cancelled all the time, you know. It's symptomatic of a wider thing. And then I started to unpick what that wider thing was. And I think it probably got a bit of traction because, you know, this was, you know, end of March 2024. We were at the end of the long, horrific 14 years of the Tory rule, when they basically decimated public service broadcasting in the UK.
Yeah.
On ideological grounds. So of course, me having a pop at them and having a pop at what they'd done to the TV landscape in the UK, but also then actually sort of, I tried towards the last third to sort of rally people to go, you know, there's a quote I love from The Simpsons where I think Lisa Simpson said to Homer, you know, every crisis is an opportunity, and Homer said, woohoo, a crisis-opportunity. You know, so I'm not a kind of a doom and gloom merchant. What I'm interested in is how can this crisis and this change in the way that TV is made, TV is funded, how can it then lead to more opportunity, not less? But I think all of that kind of caught people's imagination, really, and maybe it was just a slow news day.
I mean, I hadn't thought about it till the way you framed it, but I guess when you've got some people ideologically against whatever a public service broadcaster is, so then they're a bit like, you know, they might do with, say, health services or local authority services, anything like that. If you think it's all down to the individual, then you will not see the cultural importance of the soft power it gets you. I'm pretty sure Doctor Who's pretty globally famous, but you don't get a Doctor Who unless you've got hundreds of other things going on, because it isn't that everything you make is a success, but if the whole amorphous thing is operating, then those successes can be born, because Law of Averages says they were. And it made me think of like the parallels of when Thatcher agreed to give up the ED levy on film and basically said, not to the world, basically said to America, you can come and show your films for free now. Whereas it used to be films got shown that were foreign, i.e. American Hollywood, and money went into a pot so you could make UK film, which obviously created UK jobs. But more importantly, I think, told a cultural story about Britain, whatever it was. It could be something as daft as Condor Man. It could be On the Buses, but it still could be telling a story which was uniquely British, and that's kind of what Doctors is. And obviously, while you're exactly right, and in a way, this political kind of argument at the center of this, which I think we'll come back to with one of my film choices later, you know, it boils down to, you know, we're living in late stage capitalism, and late stage capitalism says anything that doesn't turn a profit has no value at all. And you know, the reality of it is, as far as I can see, is that, you know, if that's the way you run any creative industry, you know, and then there's a question about calling them industries, but if you run any creative industry solely on a profit-driven basis, it's not sustainable, because, you know, the Russell T Davises of this world, or the Jack Thornes, or the Sarah Phelps, or, you know, talking about screenwriters here, but, you know, you can say the same about actors, directors, anybody. All of these people learned their trade in public service broadcasting or soaps, and you know, and the reality is they're not profit driven. You know, and actually, you know, this is always the argument that I see against things like the BBC, which is a massively complex institution, and, you know, there are huge arguments around it. But, oh well, I don't watch the proms, so why should I pay for it? And I kind of want to pull out what's left of my hair, because I go, because if you don't have that, you don't get the things that you want to pay for. It's, you know, and so in a way, the thing that I'm really exercised about, I think, is trying to see things systemically and understing that, you know, yes, it's a business, and yes, it has to function along sort of, you know, things have to make a profit, but the reality is not everything has to make a profit, and you subsidize the things that don't make a profit with the things that do.
and then you have a sustainable industry. And at the moment, what's happening because of all these changes, you don't have a sustainable industry. Not enough people can make a living.
No.
So that what's going to happen, I think, 5 years down the line or less, Russell T Davies, I think, even as we're speaking, his latest show for Channel 4, Tiptoe, has just gone into production today, which is fantastic. But where's the next Russell T Davies going to come from? Where, and law of averages says you need, I don't know, something, you need like 10 Russell T Davises starting out to get one brilliant one coming out the end of the process. You know what I mean? So it's a purely an issue of sustainability, but it's also an issue about, for me, what is the purpose of the creative arts and the stories that we tell, and and we were talking just before we started recording about you don't get like art house TV anymore. If you did, and I remember when we were kids, there was some batshit stuff on that only five people in a whippet watched.
Well, I'd even go as far as like Chucky, which was for kids, which was pretty mainstream.
Precisely, some absolutely out there stuff that got made. It got made because it was affordable, and that's another issue about telly now. The cost of making it's gone through the roof, and the streamers, the values that the streamers have brought to it. Let's throw 10 million or more per episode. The public service broadcasters and our channels can't compete with. So, but that stuff was around, and because it was around, you had a healthier, more sustainable ecosystem, basically, which is what we don't have now. And I'm giving a keynote speech next week in Leeds at Leeds University about all of this. And so I've been watching stuff that was coming out at the Edinburgh TV Festival, and the kind of the writing on the wall from the Edinburgh TV Festival was nobody really knows what to do. YouTube is now the second biggest thing watched. Younger people aren't watching linear television. Older people, my mum's 81. She don't watch linear telly. She watches catch-up. She watches, So the way that we fund, develop, make, and watch telly is changing at such a rapid pace that I don't see how anybody can call it anything other than what it is, which is a paradigm shift. And paradigm shift just means that nobody knows where it's going and nobody knows what's coming next. But what I do know and what I really care about is, for people like me, from my background, that it was absolutely impossible to get through the door for me when I started writing 20 plus years ago. But for somebody from my background now, forget it. You can't even find the door.
Well, now you're trying to write a hit record every time, aren't you? This isn't, which is the world. This is the world I exist in. Is you're trying to write a hit single, and that's how you'll get that's how you'll get noticed. Now, obviously, there's one thing writing it. There's another thing getting it moving anywhere or getting it moving with anyone. So that's different. So then, if that's the crisis paradigm shift, what is the what did Homer call it? A crisis
opportunity.
What is the crisis opportunity then? What's the positive then we can glean from this moment in time?
So my take on this is the thing that we can't do as a country and as an industry is compete like for like with the streamers, which I think is one of the things that's caused the crisis. Because I think that our channels have gone, oh shit, well, we'd better spend that amount of money on our stuff, and it's always got to have a big star in it, and it's got to be a massive success. I'm sure they might argue with me if they were talking with me now, but I think it's the counterintuitive thing, which is, they don't have enough money to do that. So the answer to the situation is not what we get, which is we need to spin off more shows off Death in Paradise, or you know what I mean? We need to repeat success. Things have got to be a success. My thinking is you can't, this is not a quote from Einstein, but it's falsely given to him, which is you can't solve a problem with the same thinking that created it.
Yeah.
So the solution then is we need to go back to basics. We need to create more opportunity by taking bigger risks, innovating, bringing in a lot of creators who are working on the kind of in the YouTube and TikTok space and stuff. But also, I think you need to invest, in the future of the industry by actually going, people need to be able to make a living, so we need to make shows for lower budgets, more of them, and just kind of try shit. But at the moment, what the industry doesn't feel like it's doing is that. What it feels to me like it's doing is going, okay, we've got to carry on doing the same things, and again, if you do the same thing and expect a different outcome, that's the definition of insanity.
Yeah.
So it's counterintuitive. And again, for me, talking about the political framework, you look at what the current government is doing. They're doing more of the doubling down on the stuff that isn't working. Or, well, we need more austerity, we need more cuts. You go, well, how is that going to work?
Yeah.
So it's that logic. And for me, that's the opportunity, because you go, one of the things that I learned daily working on a show like Doctors, which was made for tuppence halfpenny in comparison to most TV. The limits on what we could do, the kind of, right, okay, you can only have, in any episode of Doctors, we were only allowed 3 guest characters. You couldn't have a car crash. You couldn't do these things. But anybody who watched that show would tell you that day in, day out, you saw the widest variety of storytelling, from dream sequences, two-handers, farces, comedies. No subject was off the table, because it was necessity was the mother of invention.
Yeah.
Right. And so for me, that I think is what the industry needs. But I understand why it's difficult for people who are working within the industry in positions of power to go down that road, because it's their jobs.
Yeah.
And their jobs are reliant on coming up with the next big success that will sell globally. So we're sort of trapped in this loop that I think the only way out of is to just kind of go, all right, just chuck the rule book up in the air and go, let's make some stuff. You know what I mean? And so earlier this year, mindful that I was becoming a right whingy old sod without coming up with any solutions, I pitched again on socials the notion of bringing back Play for Today, but doing it so that every single channel, all of our 5 channels, would produce 6 a year, and they'd do them in the regions. They wouldn't do them in London, and and all of that kind of stuff. And they'd work with existing talent and who were struggling, and they'd work with new people who wanted a foothold in. Channel 5 are doing it now. I'm not suggesting they're doing it because I suggested it.
I was about to ask there, Philip.
Would that I had that kind of power? But I think Channel 5 are doing it because it's a good idea. It's a good idea, and I think anybody, the current guy who runs Channel 5, whose name currently escapes me, is clearly kind of going, money is tight, but what can we do? What can we do to kind of reinvigorate the sector? And so it's great that Channel 5 are doing that. Very limited as a kind of an experiment, but I hope it works, and I hope other channels do the same and do similar things.
I know this is an atrocious example because it talks to what the streamers have made a success out of, but actually it was I don't know if you saw the show. Now I forgot the name of it now. The one where it's the police interrogation thing, where it's the people on one side of the glass and the people and that's all it was. Literally 2. They never left the stairwell. They only went in the room that looked in the interrogation room, so it's 3 spaces. If it was indeed probably just a real building. So that's money that obviously there was high production values with that limited space, but there's nothing that could stop you making that kind of formatted television. And I was saying to Philip, just talking to the audience for a second, about that I was doing some work through a book called Writing TV Scripts by Stephen Wetton, who did Growing Pains. And while instinctively I knew this, I'd never fully understood how most drama worked, certainly TV, in the sense of duologues, i.e. most of it is 2 people talking in a room or in a external location. So if that's all you need to create drama, essentially, then cut your cloth accordingly. And this is going to, the more you were talking, the more I can't help thinking that maybe what public service broadcasters need to become is like the band The Fall. The whole 50,000 Fall fans can't be wrong. It was never that The Fall were going to be as big as U2, but as long as what they made kept 50,000 people happy, i.e., we kept 750,000, 1 million people tune in to watch something in some way, shape, or form, then it's working, isn't it? Then that's kind of
I mean, and again, maybe this is speaking to our age, Stuart, but there's part of me that kind of feels like we need a bit of punk.
Yeah.
We need a bit of the punk ethos, which was I can't sing and I can't play. Let's form a band, right?
Yeah.
It's there was something about and talking about like duologues. I'm gonna sort of break my arm to pat myself on the back here, but one of the things I wrote for Doctors, which I'm immensely proud of, was so this was a classic example, right? So COVID happened.
Yeah.
All TV production shut down. Doctors was one of the very first shows to go back into production.
Okay.
In Birmingham, and we as writers got given this basic, how to write under the strictures of COVID. And the basic principle was, you can't have more than 3 people in a room. They can't be more than however close to each other. I mean, you remember all the COVID telly, right? They couldn't pass each other anything. They couldn't touch each other, right? And this is GP surgeries. You go, well, how are we going to do this? So in the midst of that, I came up with an idea and I wrote this thing, which was ended up being called 3 Consultations and a Funeral, right? And it is literally 3 two-handers. So it's a doctor and a patient 3 times. So 3 10-minute consultations across half an hour. And it isn't available online anywhere, which is a shame. But it was Lucy Benjamin, who's a fantastic actress who'd done a lot of work in EastEnders, and Dido Miles, who was one of the regulars on Doctors. And the basic outline of the story was the woman comes in saying she can't sleep. Can she get some sleeping pills? And slowly the doctor begins to realize that she's being coercively controlled and abused by her husband, who we never see. So he rings her and we see her reaction, but we never see. And it's called 3 Consultations and a Funeral because between the second and the third scene, she ends up taking his life off screen.
Yeah.
Right. And it was brilliantly executed by the team, shot under COVID conditions, and it won Best Single Episode at the Soap Awards, and it won an RTS Midlands Award as well.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But the reason I raise it is not to just say, aren't I great, but to say, it was a classic example of not only do we have limited resources, but they can't even touch each other. Right? And they've got to stay this much. And then you go, does that stop you telling a story? Does that stop you doing? No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
It doesn't at all, So I do think, I think, maybe something about the kind of political landscape and the kind of financial landscape does call for a bit more of a punk aesthetic, which of course, where you get it now is you get it on YouTube and you get it on.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah.
You know what I mean? You get that kind of storytelling there because people just go, I have very limited resources, but I've got an iPhone, I can make something. And I've got a distribution out there. I can put it out there. So it's not that people who work in traditional telly don't know about all this, but it's like trying to turn around an oil tanker. And it's also like trying to turn around an oil tanker that you're desperately trying to keep afloat while it's sinking. Do you know what I mean? So it's a phenomenally difficult thing to go through for an industry like this, to go through a paradigm shift, to go in, how do we keep telling stories to people when all the industry is screaming is 10 million an episode, 20 million an episode, the biggest stars, highest production values, it's got to sell around the world. And what gets lost in that is all of this smaller stories, the more localized stories, the more out there stories that aren't necessarily going to immediately appeal to people on a kind of, I think it's really made me laugh over the last sort of year and a half. How many assassin dramas have we had?
Well,
assassins and spies. You know what I mean? Oh, she's a housewife and she's an assassin.
Well, I think that speaks to the tax incentives of trying to develop an idea which goes across different countries, which obviously,
exactly,
which is then you can see it in the production. You go, oh right, yes, this means you can shoot in Ireland, London,
sure, and you can sell it anywhere around the world.
Yeah.
One of the things I noticed, and actually I haven't had the opportunity to say this whenever I've spoken about this in the past. One of the things I noticed that for me was a kind of a symptom of something going slightly wrong, and this again might just be me. You know that moment when TV dramas started to have like glitzy red carpet premieres? I kind of went, why are we doing that? Why are we spending money so that all these big stars. I mean, don't get me wrong, a cast and crew screening, a kind of a celebration of the work, but something about this kind of, we're having a big red carpet premiere for this new show.
I suppose because if you think of the advent of the influence of a streamer, a BBC show now that might launch on a Sunday, but then lets all its episodes available in one go, has got a long tail. So therefore, the only real event is one you create for yourself, because the TV event watching that we would have grown up with, which is obviously that bus has left the station now, where we would go back into school and go, did you see Eddie Shoestring? And you did. You know what I mean? It's like one for the teenagers there. But that was what it was. You had no choice. Sunday night that was on, and then years later, Heartbeat was on, and that's what you got to talk about and whatever. So yeah, I think that might be to do with that. I.e., that for some shows, if they've got that prestige and they want to create the prestige, even because while there is so much choice, the other threat is whatever you make can get lost. And I think, look, I think we could talk about this for a long time, and I think we might have to draw it to a close. What I was thinking was the subtext of there was a subtext to what you were saying, which is, on the one hand, there's the industry loss, which is people don't get to work, which is a bad thing. But then the double loss is we don't get a domestic audience being able to see stories about themselves and about the world they know exists. Plus, for the occasional Doctor Who and Line of Duty that comes out of that process, the rest of the world doesn't get a uniquely British experience as well. It's always interesting. I listened to the podcast Script Notes, and it's hilarious for me listening to John August, who did Charlie's Angels and all them Tim Burton films, talking about Line of Duty. You're like, because BBC America is a big deal, obviously. It's but not everything on BBC is on BBC America, so it's only the few things that travel. So there's the localized cultural enhancement we get from it, plus there's the soft power that we spread. But obviously, as I think we both agree, the ideologues aren't too bothered about, or can't see that as far as the end of their nose in terms of those things. They just take for granted that we'll always be great because we had an empire, which...
No, of course, and let's not go down that road.
Exactly.
But picking up on your point, just before we do move on to it, the pressure on program commissioners and developers and executives and makers is that now every show has got to play on BBC America.
Yeah.
It's got to and sell around the world, because and therefore they can't afford to make it if it doesn't. And then that narrows the playing field to, well, let's get Jed Mercurio, let's get Russell T Davies, let's get the people who've been successful in the past, and that again narrows the window of opportunity. And makes the so it's a kind of perfect storm of these things. That to me, the only solution to is to basically throw the rule book out of the window and get punk and just go, all right, nobody really wants to go back to the days of, if somebody gave you the nod in the BBC canteen, you got to make a show. But something of that, here's a lower budget than the industry is currently at, but go away and get creative and make something, because I don't think we're going to get there otherwise. I think we're just going to get this austerity on austerity, and then it's going to disappear.
I agree with you. I mean, a producer friend of mine always sort of insists, this is more from film, but I think it applies to TV, in the sense of we have lots of schemes, as it were, aimed at directors or aimed at writers. And that doesn't mean everyone gets to do it, but there are prominently a lot more of those. But for producers, it's assumed that producers live on bags of money and they just sit there waiting to make that next big thing. Whereas if the money that was being given out in terms of production budgets was reduced to, here's some development money, and that's smaller amounts then, so then it's many more people developing lots of ideas, then you're going to have much more to choose from in terms of what you have. And if what your constraints are, look, this is going to be maybe somewhere between Doctors and EastEnders as a budget per episode, write accordingly. But let's try and come up with something exciting. There's some optimism, but it might take a bit to properly surface. But yeah, we are going. It certainly is a difficult time because, as you say, it's a paradigm shift where the evidence is of the change, but I'm not entirely sure everybody involved is signed up to it because, people are only human. And if
they can't afford to be.
And if you can protect your position, then you will.
Yeah.
And you will just go for guarantees and hits. But maybe there will come a demand from the bottom up. Who knows? But let us, Philip, move on to 3 films that have impacted everything in your adult life. You're
getting your buzzer out, Stuart. You're getting your buzzer out, aren't you? I'm looking forward to hearing this buzzer.
I am indeed. I'm getting it out. I'm going to stop the show for a second now. Well, I should have done this admin before. Right then, we are going to move into 3 films that have impacted everything in your adult life. The rules are simple. Philip has given me 3 movies, of which we'll go through in the order that I receive them. And we will do that for 5 minutes per film. And every time we hear this sound, we will finish talking about that movie. I'll promise you I'll let you finish your thought, but it is so we get 3 films in and not 15 minutes on one film, which I'm sure we could on any of them. So does that sound like what you signed up for?
It does indeed. Right
then, let us begin at the beginning. Philip's first choice was the first film to win all 3 major awards at Cannes Film Festival. That's Palme d'Or, Best Director and Best Actor. Star of the film, John Turturro, took classes at a secretarial school to learn how to use a typewriter. Between takes, he wrote a rough outline for Romance and Cigarettes, a 2005 film that he wrote and then was exec produced by the writers and directors of this movie, Barton Fink. That was written while they were suffering writer's block doing Miller's Crossing. I'm talking about Barton Fink, written and directed by Joel and Ethan Coen. Tell me, Philip, how and why does this film have an impact on you?
Well, so I really struggled coming up with these 3, but then I have a massive physical media collection of DVDs and Blu-rays, and I was standing in front of it going, what am I going to pick? And Barton Fink just leapt out of me. So I saw Barton Fink in 91, the year it came out, when I was at drama school, when I was at RADA.
Okay.
And I saw it at the now defunct Lumiere Cinema on St Martin's Lane, which was, if you never went to it, it's an amazing cinema. And I saw it on my own one afternoon. The first Coen Brothers movie I'd ever seen. I never saw Miller's Crossing. I never saw Raising Arizona or Blood Simple before that. And the reason I picked it was because it's such a beautifully production designed film. It's an incredibly beautiful film, but it really stayed with me, and it has come to represent something incredibly important in my life. Because when I started writing, so I always thought I was going to be an actor, and it wasn't till 10 years later, after 10 years of acting, that I sort of started to write plays and things. And I was a writer on talking of opportunity. I was a writer on attachment at Soho Theatre. And we had a module about writing for the screen with a guy whose name I can't now remember, who directed Fever Pitch, the Nick Hornby adaptation. And he did several weeks of coming in and talking to us about screenplays and stuff. And I sat there absolutely adamant going, I am not going to write for the screen. I'm always going to be a playwright. I'm never going to write for the screen. And he said, why? And I said, because I've loved film ever since I was a little kid. And I know too much about what a nightmare it is to write screenplays, about how everybody puts their fingers in the pie and everybody tells you what to do. And Barton Fink is the every screenwriter's fever dream nightmare of. And he's so full of himself, and he's so pompous about, he's like Clifford Odets. I write for the common man, and then he goes out to Hollywood thinking he can play the system, and he just gets completely rolled over. And the film doesn't make any rational sense.
No,
it's a kind of, if you watched it recently, it's just a nightmare of just, and he's next door to what turns out to be this John Goodman playing some kind of weird serial killer, and the whole hotel goes up in flames, and he's got mosquitoes and it's the kind of epitome of my experience of what it is to be a screenwriter, which is sitting in front of this box that I'm sitting in front of now, looking at you, just going, oh shit, what am I going to do? Okay. I'm very much like Aaron Sorkin, who I'm a massive fan of, who basically says that writer's block is his starting point. He lives in writer's block. And so I just adore Barton Fink for the fact that it just leans into that, and the fact that they turned a writer's block into something so beautiful and so funny and so vivid and distinct and just its own thing. I just think it's a magnificent piece of work. But not quite my favorite Coen Brothers film. I think that's probably Big Lebowski. But I just adore Barton Fink.
Well, as you intimated there, I've recently watched it in preparation for this because I'd not had the pleasure of watching it since sort of turning my hand to screenwriting, and then reading while I was getting ready for this that they wrote this during their own writer's block. If you now watch it knowing that, their emphasis on sound from the get-go, which is when you can't write, because when I say you can't write, you sat at a computer or you sat at something and you've set time aside to write and you're doing nothing. That's what not writing is, because the old adage, the easiest thing in the world is to not write. But what happens when you're trying your damnedest to write in the face of all that is that you suddenly have the hearing of a bat.
Yeah.
And the film does this so amazingly. Like just that, obviously the introduction of John Goodman's character. But even before that, it almost does a kind of setup for it with the resonating bell on the desk of the Buscemi just goes zoop, and stops it.
Yeah.
You know, when you've got the mosquito flying around.
Yeah.
And it's that idea that when you've got that block, anything feels like inspiration. Oh, there goes our first alarm. Anything and you know it's a fool's errand. It's a bit like, if I just do the washing up, then I'll be ready to go. I think it's almost like, you know, in the way that have you seen Repulsion, Polanski's film Repulsion?
No, never seen Repulsion. No.
Okay. I mean, that therapists and psychologists have said that's one of the most accurate representations of a psychotic breakdown, you know, in the sense of they show the film to students. It's seen as like such an accurate portrayal. And I think that if you really wanted to put the wind up new writers, you just show them Barton Fink and go, this is what it's going to be like. So strap in.
And also one tiny point, I know we're over time, but one tiny point I love about the film is that when he finally breaks it breaks through, you know, that somebody's died and it's all gone absolutely pear-shaped, and he eventually sits down and writes this screenplay. And they intimate so subtly that basically he's just written the same thing as he always writes. He's written the same play. You know, it starts the same way, ends the same way. And I love that thing that writers basically only tell the same story again and again and again. I just think I think it's a fantastic film. I love it so much.
Well, I've interviewed the guy that wrote the book, Psychology of Screenwriters. I don't know if you've seen that book, but
no.
He's a trained psychologist who's been a screenwriter, and he basically goes into the psyche of the writer. And I learned from him that whatever we're writing, all we're ever doing is writing about ourselves. So if I'm talking about an 8-year-old girl going to buy an ice cream, I'm writing about me. If I'm talking about an 85-year-old veteran who's going to the cenotaph, I'm writing about me, you know, and so on and so forth. And I was like, and once you kind of cotton onto that, it's kind of what do you call it? It's quite a release, really, because you're not.
Oh, completely.
Because you're not. Before knowing that, it was always a bit kind of like I have to try and imagine I am this, when in fact I'm just putting me through a different prism. Yeah. No, exactly.
Okay,
ready for second choice?
Yes.
Okay, sir. Let me just get the clock going. Right. Stanley Tucci co-wrote your second choice because he wanted a decent part for himself and to alleviate the frustration he felt while filming Jury Duty in '94, a movie he hated. I mean, given that's on public record, that's quite amazing. MGM was going to distribute the film, but it was ultimately dropped because directors Stanley Tucci and Campbell Scott refused to change the ending. I am indeed talking about 1996's Big Night Out. Big Night from 1996, starring and co-directed by Stanley Tucci and Campbell Scott. So tell me, why did this film have such an impact on you? What are the fond memories from it?
Okay, so there was a thing in the 90s called Cinema Day, where all the cinemas in London, when I still lived there, all the cinemas in London, every movie was a quid, and they were showing new films.
That was in Bury as well.
There you go. Wasn't it fantastic?
Yeah.
Right. So me and some mates wandered around London on this day in '96, and we saw Gridlocked, the one with Tupac Shakur and Tim Roth.
Yeah.
We saw Grosse Point Blank.
Amazing.
Obviously John Cusack, fantastic movie. And then the third one was this one that wasn't even out yet, called Big Night. And it is. I don't really do favorites and I don't do top fives, but Big Night is my favorite film. If anybody ever asks me, it's my favorite film.
Oh wow!
There's so much I love about it. I almost don't know where to start, but really fundamentally why I love it so much and why it stayed with me so long is because for me it is the perfect evocation of art versus commerce. So it goes back to our earlier conversation, right? So Tony Shalhoub, who was also in Barton Fink, Tony Shalhoub is the chef primo, and he's a genius chef. But his brother Secondo, played by Stanley Tucci, is the maitre d', and they have come over from Italy to open this restaurant, and they're dying on their arse. They're absolutely dying on their arse. Meanwhile, across the road is Ian Holm with potentially one of the worst Italian accents in cinema history, running this gaudy trattoria that is full every single night, and all it seems to do is crap food, spaghetti and meatballs, etc. And there's this scene in Big Night that has stayed with me, and I think about it almost every day. So he's trying to organize this event where Louis Prima, this big jazz guy, is going to come to the restaurant. They're going to get pressed, and they're going to finally become the success. And Secondo's trying to explain this to Primo, and Primo says, people should come just for the food. They should come just for the food. And Secondo, Stanley Tucci, says, I know, but they don't. And that is like, it's art versus commerce. It's the challenge of being a creative person and being a storyteller in a nutshell. And it goes back to everything we've been talking about this whole time, because for me, it's just like, of course they should come just for the food. They should come just to hear the story that you want to tell or I want to tell, but they don't. They don't. They come because, David Tennant's in it, and they come because, do you know what I mean? I don't know why I picked David Tennant, but and so that's the kind of thematic of the film, but then the execution of it is just, food films in general are so hard to pull off, and it is one of the greatest food films of all time. The meal that they produce, it's like sort of half an hour of the film, and it's a film you cannot watch if you haven't had a good meal beforehand. and so that's astonishing. Alison Janney's in it in an early role before she was in The West Wing, and she's fantastic. And then the thing that I will finally say is, talking about the final scene, it has one of the greatest final scenes in cinema history. Which, if people haven't seen it, they must see it. Go and seek it out on streaming or whatever, or get the DVD if you still got a DVD player. But it's one shot. There's no dialogue. It goes on for about 6 minutes, and it's the perfect ending to, for me, a perfect film that I just think you couldn't better as an evocation of, as I say, art versus commerce and the intractability of that problem. I adore the film.
But I think in a way, though, I know you're saying it's art and commerce, but I think you've also differentiated between film and TV. And I know there's this kind of received wisdom now that because we've got big tellies, everything's cinema. But that kind of choice, you're right. It's not exactly a mainstream choice, but that is, to me, that's the kind of choice that cinema will try and make and get away with if it can. But you'd never really be nudging. If you're making TV, the director has a wholly different role, don't they, in TV compared to a movie. There goes our alarm again, sir.
Yes.
I'm
so gutted. We've only got 5 minutes. I could talk about Big Night for hours. We could do a whole podcast on Big Night. I love it so much.
Well, I mean, like often happens with this, that's a film I've never seen. So you haven't?
No. Oh, Stuart! Oh my God, you've got to watch it.
No, and that's the thing. This is what it becomes its own self-fulfilling prophecy. This podcast, I get to be tipped off about stuff that's not always, which is why. Go on, sorry.
I was just going to say it's not only beautiful, it's hilarious, it's really entertaining. It has also one of the best crap scraps in cinema history. Between the two brothers at one point. It is Minnie Driver's in it, Isabella Rossellini's in it. It's the kind of film that just wouldn't get made now and couldn't get made now, but it's brilliant.
But also, given what we said before about budgets and stuff, I imagine, there's a version you could make of this that could be for tuppence as much as there's one that has top stars in it, because ultimately it's performance dependent. It's not about spaceships and creating worlds that don't exist. It's restaurants and cities.
And to be fair, I think if Stanley Tucci were here, he would say it was made for tuppence. I mean, it quite clearly they didn't have a lot of money, and they made the money. They made the money they had go an awfully long way. But it's it's beautiful. It's a really beautiful film. I recommend it to everybody.
I think that's clear. For your final choice, to make it as authentic as possible, no lights were used in this movie, and the camera work was entirely handheld. Unfortunately, it was ruled ineligible to compete in the Oscars in 2003 because it was shown on Irish and British television the same night it premiered in London. Although it did world premiere at Sundance, which I don't quite understand why the rules didn't sort of get that. But anyway, I'm indeed talking about Bloody Sunday, 2002, Paul Greengrass. Tell me, why does this have such an impact on you, and what fond memories does it hold for you? So
I saw Bloody Sunday on telly.
Mm-hmm.
So, for the first time, it was co-funded, I think, by Granada TV, Granada Films.
Yeah.
So, it came from some public.
Was it in two parts, if I remember rightly? Was it not?
I mean, I think there were adverts in it, but I think it was shown as one piece.
Okay.
So, because I certainly remember seeing it as one piece, and why did it have such a big influence on me? Over and above the execution of it.
Yeah.
And this was the first time I think that. So Paul Greengrass, who was a documentary maker for World in Action and a journalist, he had previously made The Murder of Stephen Lawrence, which was a single film, I think, for TV. And then he and his producer Mark Redhead made Bloody Sunday, and I think it was the first time that the world kind of saw Paul Greengrass's methodology in action. Why I think this is such an extraordinary film, and why it stayed with me really, is because the execution of it is incredible. The way it tells the story. For me, his ability, and I think it's a pretty unique ability actually, and it comes from a journalistic background, I'm sure, to take you into the minutiae of a day like that, and never to demonize anybody, even the people who ended up doing appalling things. So he never dehumanizes anybody. And going back to, again, the first half of our conversation, that sense of human beings functioning within systems. So the paratroopers, the people who were the IRA, Jimmy Nesbitt's character, who's a human rights and campaigner, etc. He never dehumanizes it, and the power of it as a piece of documentary drama was so inspiring to me that basically it inspired a whole strand of my life. So you can see behind me on my office wall here this poster for Deep Cut.
Yeah.
Keeping this very brief because I know I've got no time at all. But basically, I got the opportunity a couple of years later to meet a family whose daughter was killed at Deep Cut Barracks in Surrey, along with 3 other recruits. And I spent then 2.5 years, writing a verbatim documentary play about their story.
Yeah.
And that play was very successful and helped to sort of reignite the campaign around that they were fighting to find out the truth about how their children were killed. And then it led me down a particular road where to this day, even today, I'm working on something in that realm. True stories, injustice stories told through the screen and on stage. And the inspiration from Bloody Sunday to actually go, it is possible to tell complex stories of injustice with real nuance, with real skill, and with real humanity, and never lose sight of them. And it still be an extraordinarily cinematic, gripping, evocation of that tragedy and of that massacre, without at any point losing sight of who's who, where's where, what's going on. I just think it's incredibly skilled, and I think he then went on obviously to work on the Bourne films, and then perhaps his masterpiece, people might argue, is United 93, about his particular take on the events of 9/11. But for me, nothing surpasses Bloody Sunday. I just think it's an extraordinary piece of work in terms of how to tell those complex, difficult stories with nuance and humanity. I think it's brilliant.
But also as well, that idea of, like you talk about the humanity side of it, it's, we grew up in a time when there was a black and white description of what was going on in Ireland, between Ireland and the UK. And I think Bloody Sunday, the drama, sort of tried to show
Yeah, and I think something about, and obviously that tradition has existed as long as storytelling has existed, and obviously Jimmy McGovern did similar work. He even did a version of Bloody Sunday for television. He also did Hillsborough and has continued to do that. And right up to today with something like Jamie Crichton's I Fought the Law, which is on ITV right now, or obviously Mr. Bates versus the Post Office. There's a long.
I was going to say, and even Say Nothing, the one that was on Disney here. But I was just thinking of that idea of. I was trying to think what was confusing me. My thoughts for a second there, but yeah, it's just the idea of us telling stories that we're not that it's still fresh. What the troubles were in Ireland, the troubles were, as we called us, was in Ireland, but obviously what Irish people would call trying to get the British out of Ireland. It's not, but we never got told that side of it at all, really.
No, and for me that's why it's an extraordinary piece of journalism as much as it is a piece of drama. And it doesn't shortchange either side of that equation.
Yeah, and if you think about I think Ken Loach doing, say, Hidden Agenda, it wasn't really presenting as a true story. But it was because we couldn't do, at that point, we weren't really culturally willing to do it.
No, and you watch something like Bloody Sunday, you can feel the journalism. And various partisan sides could attack it, but actually you can feel the journalism in it. You can, and that's also something about the way Greengrass casts kind of real people alongside. And also you watch something like Bloody Sunday and you go, not only is it an extraordinary piece of drama, clearly it was an extraordinary piece of on the ground. It was like an extraordinary piece of social realism, because where did they get all those people from? They shot it in Dublin. They didn't shoot it in Derry. Where the events had happened. But there were thousands of people there reconstructing that. That's a massive organizational thing to make that work, to keep those people safe, to engage them, to work as a piece of community theatre as much as it was a piece of cinematic drama. So I just think on every level it was just astonishing. And I was really fortunate years later, because of Deep Cut, I got the opportunity to work with Mark Redhead on a project that didn't get made, about walking wounded survivors of the 7/7 bombings. So it was a real kind of, for me, that was a wow, to get to work with him particularly. Because he not only did he produce Bloody Sunday, but he's in it. He's one of the journalists who's constantly questioning Jimmy Nesbitt. So yeah, that was amazing.
Well, look, we've come to the end of 3 films that have impacted everything in your adult life. I think there's 3 very different stories of how film has impacted you. That's brilliant. The sort of textbook entry into the canon now for my podcast. And thank you for sharing your thoughts and ideas around what you describe as the paradigm shift that's happening within TV and in particular, but also in film.
Well, it's my pleasure, and thank you so much for having me. It's been a delight. But you've got to let go of this 5-minute thing, Stuart. You've got to let go of this 5-minute thing. You've got to give people more time, man. Got to give them more time.
If only that was the case. Trust me. Do remember to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, follow on Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts for more movies that impacted your life. And if you want to, I'd love to know what your favourite movies are, what your fondest movie memories are. So please share your favourite movies that impacted your life on Twitter. Look for @LeightonRocks. And you can always leave me a review, 5-star preferably. And in your review, tell us which 3 films impacted your life. Best ones get read out on the podcast.
Hey there, it's Hugh from Podderation here. If you like today's show, why not have a listen to The Ramble? Ridiculous, irreverent, and sometimes maybe just a little bit raunchy. The Ramble is what you get when you put 2 professionally funny people in a room together and give them license to talk about anything they want underneath the umbrella of nerdy hobbies. We think you'll love it, and if you want to check it out, go to our website at podderation.com.